Hello aspirants, welcome to the Hi-Fi of the Day, Daily Current Affairs by Alchemy IAS Institute. I am Suhas. We are going to discuss the 5 most important topic from news which will be relevant for your UPSC preparation today. International Court of Justice, ICJ, new ruling on climate change. What is the new ruling? The countries have a legal obligation to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and the failure to act could be mean to international legal liability and compensation to affected nation. How it is important for our UPSC preparation and what are the key takeaways? The case led by Vanuatu, a small Pacific island nation, spearheaded the request to ICJ on behalf of climate vulnerable state that rising sea level will affect this small island nations. And at advisory, this thing is advisory but authoritative. The ruling is non-binding, but they represent the most authoritative interpretation of the international law on climate responsibility. And the legal duty over the policy choices that climate action is now seen as a legal obligation, not just moral or policy preference like earlier. And the reparation concept introduced, like that compensation should be given to affected nation. The countries failing this climate obligation may owe a full compensation to injured state, like in the smaller islands. And the common but differentiated responsibility principle reaffirmed the ruling strengthened the stance that the developed nation must bear a larger burden due to the historical emission of these greenhouse gases and causing climate change, aligning with the common but differential responsibility principle under the United Nations Forum for Climate Change. And global legal influence that while not enforceable, this ruling can guide future climate litigation and influence domestic and international courts. So in this perspective, this thing is important for UPSC. Another news the president rule in Manipur extension passed by the Lok Sabha. So what is the news? What is the issue? There was a issue going on, ethnic clash between Kukis and Meiteis in Manipur, and in light that president rule got imposed in Manipur, and here now the Lok Sabha passed a statutory resolution on July 30, 2025 to extend the president's rule in Manipur to 6 months more, and the Rajya Sabha must also approve this extension for it to take effect. And the first imposition came in February 2025 after the Chief Minister and Byron Singh resigned and amid prolonged ethnic violence. And the Ministry of State for Home Affairs, the Nityanand Raj justified the extension citing recovery of arms and declining violence. For the last 4 months, no violence happened, no violent incident happened, and a lot of arms got recovered. So what is the constitutional provision, relevant constitutional provisions? Article 355 talks about the duty of union government to protect the state from external aggression and internal disturbance. And Article 356 talks about the duty of union government to impose president rule. And it's like an imposition of president rule or constitutional emergency or state emergency if the constitutional machineries is failing in the state. Then if president certifies that, they will dismiss the state government, assume the functions of the state executive, and dissolve the or suspend the legislative assembly. And the extension of president rule, it's initially valid for 6 months only, can be extended every 6 months for a maximum period of 3 years, but provided with the conditions that the national emergency should be enforced, and the election commission should certify that the election or as like the fresh election is not possible in that state for forming the new legislative assembly in the state and form the government. And the parliamentary procedure require the approval by both the houses of the parliament, that is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and this approval should be attained within 2 months of the proclamation. World Economic Outlook report July 2025 by the IMF. The theme is global economy, tenors and resilience amid persistent uncertainty. So what is the resilience? What is the persistent uncertainty? The resilience is despite massive disruption, that pandemic, Ukraine war, inflation, or like a tariff shock, the global economy country to grow, showing resilience but fragile. The global GDP growth in 2023 is 3.5, 2024 3.3, 2025 3.0 and 2026 expected 3.1. And the persistent uncertainties, trade war and tariff, especially under Trump 2.0, and geopolitical tension in Ukraine and Middle East, and rising government debt and interest rate, and disruption in global supply chain. So what is the condition? India's growth outlook. India, it's a bright spot that highest growth among large economies and gaining ground in absence of GDP size and faster than China, US and the European Union. And positioned to overtake the developed nations in total GDP. You can see the total GDP. India is still robust. And if you look at US, a downturn attribute to the tariff tension under Trump administration, tight monetary policy and warning stimulus effect. Like you can see that US GDP is falling. And about China, the biggest upgrade in July and growth resilient despite the global headwind. And you can see that China's GDP is growing, increasing. And about Eurozone and major economy, Euro area have improved to 1%. Germany, that's still stagnation, that only 0.1%. And the UK, weaker growth, that is 1.2%. Japan, slight rise, that is 0.7%. And Russia, sharp slowdown from 4.3% to 0.9%. That is post-war effect of Ukraine-Russia war. So what are the challenges and risks highlight? Trade war is an uncertainty, like copper, and risk of escalate this protectionism and geopolitical instability in Middle East and Ukraine. Then countries that could inflate commodity price and debt and interest rate, like government borrowing increases, and advanced economies are at risk of highest debt serving cost, and emerging economies like face a borrowing cost hike, affect the infrastructure and the social project. What is Trump's 25% tariff on India? And there is a potential 100% penalty on countries buying Russian oil. That US is proposing to impose sanctions on countries who are buying, buying Russian oil in the light of Russia-Ukraine war. They'll be imposing 100% tariff. And this complicated the India's ongoing trade negotiation with the US, initially targeted for October 2025. What it matters, why it is matters to India? The immediate consequences will be the disadvantage in Indian export versus countries with the trade deals like Vietnam and Indonesia. And weaker India's tariff edge over China's temporary, because unless India is secure a deal soon, because China is already there, and the US importers are uncertain because Indian export order delay, and especially for a fall winter season. And the negotiation dynamic changes because Trump moves shrinking the negotiation timeline. India may need to wrap up the talk by August or September. Also, like the interim deal being pushed before the final term settlement, and China talks are already in advanced stages. Beijing may secure a waiver or a lower tariff first before India. That will be disadvantageous to India's export. There was an article on India's police must get out of the Dirty Harry's shadow. So what is this, who is this Dirty Harry? It's a fictional character. It's a police officer, Inspector Dirty Harry. He will be taking everything in his hand and using coercion, or as like threatening the victims and accused. And his method is through confession. He will solve the cases. So that that the context was the custodial death and police brutality in India, especially in light of the recent custodial death of Ajit Kumar in Tamil Nadu. And the author contrasts two models of policing, one with that another fictional character, that Sherlock Holmes, and this Dirty Harry. Sherlock Holmes' method is like analytical, evidence-based, and a law-abiding method. It's more scientific also. But Dirty Harry's model is intimidating, impatient, and rely on coercion or a confession. That problem, why is the problem with this confession? During the torture, the people will often give a false confession, or else like that brain may not be functioning properly, or memory may not be work properly, and they will give a false confession in order to get rid of this, or else like escape from this pain. So we'll not get the proper evidence. So key factor highlighted in the article is the custodial death and impunity. That 687 deaths in police custody between 2018 and 2023, and the high incidence in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, UP, etc. And many deaths are labeled as suicide or illness, or to avoid the scrutiny, because police want to escape from this like legal complications, and the legal and structural gap is no standalone anti-torture law despite the Supreme Court and Law Commission recommendations. As of now, there is no like that, and India is yet to ratify the United Nations Convention Against the Torture, not ratified yet. And in 2025, India ranked as the high-risk country in global torture index. And the societal tolerance for torture, like torture normalized in public perception, and the pop culture and even TV shows like portray forced conversion is an heroic thing. That's a misconception that is there in Indian society. So